Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions. And today's opinions will be about The In-Between Bookstore by Edward Underhill. And this book hit all the feels for me. Okay, so The In-Between Bookstore is about Darby, who has just lost his job, and his New York City's apartment is, like, the rent is shooting up sky high at the end of the month, so he's not going to be able to stay there. And so at loose ends, he decides to try out going back home to his tiny hometown in Illinois. His mother is moving, and he thinks it might be a good break to help her pack up his childhood home. But the real reason is a lot deeper than that. He needs time to figure out where he fits, what bits of himself that he lost when he moved away might he want to try to save, and the thing weighing the heaviest on his shoulders is trying to figure out what the hell happened between him and his childhood best friend, Michael. Making this easier or harder or more complicated or just weirder is the fact that pretty much as soon as he gets home, he notices that every time he steps into the bookstore that he worked at as a teenager, he meets a younger version of himself. The version of himself desperate to leave this place, the version of himself that didn't yet realize that he was trans, and the version of himself who is on the way to having a big falling out with Michael in just a few days. Can he fix whatever the hell went wrong more than a decade ago? So the book made me cry at least 5 times, and I will admit part of that is because I was emotionally fragile to begin with. It's a trying time, let's put it that way. But they were all good cries from this book. Every time I picked it up, I struggled to put it down. I think I read this in 2 days, and I could have probably finished it in 1, except I thought I might work that night. It was like, I should probably go to sleep now. It managed to distract me in a time that I was frankly struggling to find anything that will distract me. So much of this book is about how you can't just go home again, but you can't really leave home either. About how where we grew up and who we grew up around really shapes us in a way that we often want to try to separate ourselves from, but it will always be there. And yeah, all the stuff with Darby struggling to deal with how different and yet the same everything is back home, and how it is at its core really about how different and yet the same he is. That's all really strong, and all that felt so fucking familiar to me. The longing, the ache of nostalgia, the feeling like you can see things so much more clearly now, and the anger that you didn't see it that clearly back then. The feeling of desperately wanting to take the best bits of your home with you, and feeling that you can't even hold on to them while they are directly in front of you. All of that was fucking perfect. The feeling of wonder, of not wonder like, ooh, wonder, but wonder as in curiosity of like, what would have been different if this one thing had been different in my life? That's what made me tear up over and over and over again. And there's this really beautiful trick that the author pulls off here of giving the exact right amount of details for all the descriptions of the places. It's just enough left unsaid and just enough incredible specificity that it felt like it was inviting me to put my own childhood home in the blanks of what he's describing. So like, as much as, yeah, my house I don't think would have looked at all like the house described in this book, I was still seeing my house when Darby was talking about packing up his kitchen. I'm like, yeah, that's my kitchen. And like, the falls that they spend a lot of time in, my brain just automatically transported in the falls that was near my hometown, and all these things. It felt the perfect level. It captured really the taste of nostalgia in a way I don't think that I've ever read anywhere except for in the book Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. And yes, a lot of the emotions of being stuck in the past and being different than the past and feeling like you aren't the same person you were as a child is more complicated in this book because Darby is trans, and he is dealing with all these people that he knew as a child who never really knew who he was, and they're suddenly being faced with the real him, and he doesn't know if they're going to accept the real him. He doesn't know if they're going to, you know, be weird about it, and he doesn't know how to interact with them as the real him because he hasn't really had that experience. And even harder, he's doing it at a time that he is already struggling with elements of who he is. But one of the things I really loved about this book is while, yes, his gender does complicate things, that's not the part of his identity that he's struggling with. He is struggling with where he wants to be, with what he wants to do for a living, whether he can be comfortable in a small town, whether he needs the big city or will ever feel comfortable there, whether there is any one place that he will feel comfortable, the fact that he sucks at sharing his emotions, that sometimes he fails to see others because he's so focused inward. But the one thing he is well settled in is the fact that he's a guy. Like, that is not a struggle for him. And this is not a coming out story, even though, yeah, the younger version of Darby that we meet hasn't gotten there yet. But in many ways, the younger version of Darby that we run into is more a memory than a character. And this is really the story of the adult Darby addressing that. And I really liked that core of surety here. Partially just because I feel like, at least in my experience, a lot of the LGBTQIA media that you find, it's either set in queer norm societies, which I love, I'm all for that, or it's coming out stories of people struggling with their identity. And I find that candy. Like, I'm good with it. But it's also really nice to have stories that aren't about that and are about people who are very sure in their identity with that element, but are still exploring who they are in other ways. But I also admit that I really loved that so much of the focus is on the feeling of out of place, feeling like you never quite fit in, feeling like no one in your small town could possibly understand you, feeling like the memories of being separate are so loud that they overwhelm the memories of being welcome, because that is something that I feel like most of us do have some experience with. The shock of how much more complex people are that you grew up with than you remember them being. And all that stuff is stuff that I felt in my soul, and I feel like anyone who has ever been, less than the most popular kid in school is going to have that connection to these feelings. And, also, one thing that I feel like even the kids that were popular when they were in school, going home does this weird thing that turns you into, the person you were as a kid, but with the awareness of an adult. So you are acting slightly immature, you are fully aware that you are acting slightly immature, and you can't seem to stop yourself. And, damn, that all hit really hard. And I love the fact that that is all something that I feel like people are going to find really relatable, whether they're trans or not. And, also the way that, you can slot back into someone's lives almost too easily, to the point that you want to shake them and go, don't you realize I've been away? Don't you realize I'm not the same person I was? And other people, you don't seem to know how to interact with them at all, because just they aren't seeming to know how to interact with you, except for as a complete stranger. And all of this is so incredibly well done. And it's all stuff that I have not seen in a lot of books. Now, this is one of those things that I feel like might be covered more in a lot literary fiction, but I don't read literary fiction, and I'm not really interested in reading literary fiction. So seeing it in a genre that I love makes me happy. But also, I really like the fact that while Darby's trans identity is always part of the book, it does not shy away from it, it does not shy away from the struggles that he has dealt with because of it, it does not shy away from dysphoria, it does not shy away from all these heavy topics. The intense focus on the things that are a little bit more relatable to people who are not trans, I really like, because I feel like it will open the book up to people who are not trans to see Darby's struggle and how it relates to their struggle. Because I love books that show us that we are all human. We all sort of have some of the same experiences. And I feel like this book did a really good job of that. Of talking about yeah, you aren't who you were when you were a child. Whether you're trans or not, you have changed who you are. And it's there pretty obviously in the character of Michael. But it's also pretty clearly there in a lot of the other characters. All the little side characters that Darby runs into, and he discovers new elements of their personalities. These things really do feel like inviting all of us into the experience that, yeah, we are all ships of Theseus. None of us are the same person we were when we were 7 or 8. In general, I think this book does a really great job of opening up the experience for people outside of the identity to understand and connect to, while also not sacrificing that emotional core that is a trans person's story. I also love the fact that the fantasy elements in this book were really well worked in. I love the way Darby's emotions revolve around this one fantastical element. Like, a lot of the time when I read a book that is in our world but with magic, I feel like the book stumbles on the hurdle of how quickly the POV character believes. Either you have the character who believes so quickly that you just sort of roll your eyes and go, okay, I accept the fact that the narrative didn't want to waste too much time on this character going, no, I don't believe, over and over again. Or the other side of that is you end up with that POV character that chapter after chapter is coming up with excuses, going, no, this can't be real. Sometimes literally just saying over and over again, this can't be real, and that just gets endlessly annoying. But this book, I felt like Darby explored enough alternatives to be believable, but didn't linger in the "it can't be true" space for too long. Now, that being said, there were a couple of elements of how the time travel worked that I felt were a little bit super duper obvious, and Darby just was not figuring them out. And it wasn't one of those, like, I could be like, oh yeah, well, if I was in that situation, a lot of emotions are happening, I wouldn't figure it out either. No, it felt like, how do you not realize that this is happening? How did it take him so long to think of the idea of bringing someone else with him to the bookstore to see if the, time travel happens with somebody else? And it sort of got mildly annoying when he wasn't figuring these things out, but it was only mildly. The other big element in this book is the relationship between Darby and Michael. And mostly, I absolutely loved it. They are all angst and love and friendship and hurt, and it was lovely watching them rediscover each other, discover all the ways they were different as adults, discovering how they might connect together as adults, and the ways that they don't quite connect together as adults. But that being said, I did spend a lot of the book shouting at them, just talk to each other. For the love of God, just say it. And I get it. It's realistic. It's a strong emotional arc. Miscommunication is a very beloved arc in a lot of romantic stories, though I would not call this a romance because it doesn't meet one of the main rules of romance. So if you're looking for that, don't blame me for calling it a romance. And, coming to a place where they can actually be honest with each other is really the journey of the book. But I just wanted them to talk it out sooner. And the hilarious thing is I am 100% one of those people who will just not talk about deeply personal pain, especially with the person who caused the pain. Like, I'm never going to tell them if they said something that offended me. It's not going to happen. And I'm probably just going to bottle it up and forget it, or not talk to them anymore. But in books, no, that's the joy of books. I want the characters to do what I can't and just talk it out. But there were a lot of moments of me just being like, say something, anything, just say something. And on that note, Darby is also just a very in his own head kind of character, and that means a lot of the book is in Darby's head. And I don't mean that in a bad thing. I mean that, like, it feels very appropriate for the book. It is a very personal journey kind of book. And so it's an interior kind of book. It's not a book with a lot of physical action. Most of the big plot points are conversations. And even in the conversations, there's often, paragraphs and paragraphs of what Darby is thinking at that moment. And it almost entirely works for me. Like, I mostly was buying it 100%, with one real exception. Almost all of the scenes with Darby's mom, he barely says anything to her. And we get a lot of what I call elisions in the scenes, where it's just like, we talked for a few minutes and then I did this, where you don't get the blow by blow, you're just getting a synopsis. And a lot of the time he's just sitting there while she sort of hangs out with him, sometimes talks at him, and he's just thought spiraling while she's present. And, like, once again, this is something that is realistic, and there's a glory in that one relationship that you have, that you can sort of just be with someone without talking. And there is, in this book, a moment of opening up where they directly address how little they talk. But I just wanted to see a little bit more of what their relationship looks like. And specifically, I really, really, really felt like I needed to see a flashback of what their relationship was in high school. I wanted to see one scene with Darby and his mom talking in high school. And in general, there were a couple of moments I also just wanted to scream at Darby, for the love of God, pay attention to the present, not the past. But it's all part of his journey, So I accept that a lot of my feelings on this are an inevitable part of the storytelling. Like, it's not a flaw, it's a feature. That is part of this story. Beyond that, I will say the book is just intensely readable. Like, the prose is smooth and light and playful. It made me laugh more than a few times, but also it was touchingly beautiful at moments. It was simple, like I would guess the reading level would be surprisingly low on this one, but there's a beauty in its simplicity. I think heavier prose would have made this feel a little bit navel-gazy or pretentious, but this simple language allows us to concentrate on the two most important things to this book: the characters and the story. I will also mention that for a book that is intensely focused on a bookstore, I would have liked to see a little bit more action connecting to books. Like, just I want to see more books in the story. Like, there's a couple of titles shouted out. Percy Jackson makes an appearance, the book, not the character. And I just wanted to be like, okay, Darby, you're in a bookstore, go buy a book. Buy a book, leave a book, do something with a book. Let there be book action. But that's just because, you know, it's in a bookstore. I want to see more books, and I'm a nerd. I like books. But at this point, I'm really just nitpicking the story because I want to say, the one thing I want to say about this book is just that it worked for me. And, like, it hit points that I wanted it to hit. It hit the emotions I wanted to hit. It inspired emotions in me in a way that I wanted it to. It was sweet, it explored a lot of deep feelings with grace and complexity, and that I absolutely love to see. It was inclusive, having both diversity of interesting characters, and also telling a story that is both intrinsic to a window to a specific identity, but also widely relatable. And I just really liked it. But it's not one that I feel like I could deeply break apart that much. So in the end, all I find myself saying over and over again, beyond reciting what themes are here, is saying, I liked it. It's good. I enjoyed it. I encourage other people to read it. I don't know, guys. I just like this one.